So this week we're going over ethics and public speaking. Ethics is the branch of philosophy that deals with the issue of right and wrong in human affairs. Now, ethical issues arise when we ask whether or not a course of action is moral or immoral, fair or unfair, just or unjust, honest or dishonest. Now, questions of ethics come into play whenever a public speaker faces an audience because public speakers have a powerful position to spread ideas and messages. So we always want to make sure that we are sharing honest and credible and truthful ideas and messages. Because when we don't do that, things go very wrong. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. But the first thing I want to talk about in ethics of public speaking is plagiarism, right? We've all heard of plagiarism. It's posted in the syllabus. It's posted in every syllabus. And yes, it is copy and pasted from the university, all right? Plagiarism is just the act of presenting another's work or ideas as your own. Now, there are 3 types of plagiarism. The first type of plagiarism is known as global plagiarism. Global plagiarism is taking an entire speech from a single source and passing it off as their own. For example, a few years ago, former First Lady Melania Trump was accused of committing global plagiarism when she stole words or large sections from even twice former First Lady Michelle Obama, right? In 2008, Michelle Obama said, and Barack and I were raised with so many of the same values, that you work hard for what you want in life, that your word is your bond, and you do what you say you're going to do. A few years later, Melania Trump was accused of committing global plagiarism when she said, from a young age, my parents impressed on me the values that you work hard for what you want in life, that your word is your bond, and you do what you say and keep your promise. This was copy and paste. So remember global plagiarism as copying and pasting someone else's work and saying it's your own. Melania Trump is an example of this type of plagiarism. The next type of plagiarism is called patchwork plagiarism. Now, this is like Legos. It occurs when a speaker patches a speech together by copying verbatim from 2 or 3 sources. So, Ariana Grande is an example of patchwork plagiarism because her song 7 Rings was accused of having a stolen harmony from Rodgers and Hammerstein's 1959 song, My Favorite Things from The Sound of Music. On top of that, during the same lawsuit, Josh Stone claimed that the hook's lyrics are taken from his 2017 track, You Need It, I Got It, with identical metric placement of the phrases in the 2 songs. So remember, this means that Ariana Grande took 2 sources, combined them, and tried to play it off as her own. Okay? Plagiarism is more than just words. Okay? It could also be like metric placements of a song or a picture and so forth. The third type of plagiarism is called incremental plagiarism. This occurs when a speaker fails to give credit for specific parts, increments, okay, of the speech that are borrowed from other people. So during the pandemic, there was this young woman that went viral on TikTok for sharing her idea for Converse that were inspired by national parks. All right. And she was an intern for Converse, and they were like, wow, what a really cool project, right? Whatever, they brushed it off. She graduated. Her video went very popular on TikTok for her idea. And then a few months later, Converse came out with national park themed Converse. And they didn't give her credit. Okay, this is incremental plagiarism because they took specific parts of her idea but passed it off as their own. Because when she rebutted and said, hey, you took my work, they said, oh no, you gave us X, Y, and Z national park. We did this one, and that one. This is incremental plagiarism. It's when you fail to give credit for specific parts, when you borrow just little sections. Now, how do you avoid the big P, or how do you avoid plagiarism, right? First, you want to make sure that your goals are ethically sound. Okay, you want to make sure you have a good place in your heart for sharing this idea. You also want to be fully prepared for a speech. This also means thinking about questions that might arise from your audience and answering those questions within your speech. You also always want to give credit and be honest. Another thing you want to do is avoid name calling and other forms of abusive language. This is because if you're only reasoning, if someone, is like, hey, you did plagiarism, and your only reasoning is, oh, you don't know what you're talking about, like you're dumb, that's kind of a big red flag of saying, hey, maybe this person did plagiarize because they don't know their stuff. Okay, so that's why you also always have to do research. And lastly, once you do all of these, you need to put ethical principles into practice. Now, we all have our own code of ethics, as we've learned from our reading this past module, as well as the activity you'll do in this module. So that's how you avoid plagiarism. Now, remember, in the communication process, both speakers and listeners have a job. Well, both listeners and speakers have ethical obligations. First, listeners should be courteous and attentive during the speech, okay? As a listener, you should always avoid prejudging the speaker. And listeners should maintain the free and open expression of ideas, okay? Listeners need to be like sponges. That's your ethical obligation. You don't need to agree with everything the speaker is saying, but you need to be courteous and listen. So remember, good rule of thumb, listen how you want to be listened to. Now, with that said, there are standard ethical violations that we're all aware of. The first one is lying. Lying is a false statement made with deliberate intent to deceive. So, for example, the sky is purple today. Half-truths is a second violation. And this is when a statement that is only partially true, a statement that mingles truth and falsehood with deliberate intent to deceive. So, for example, Diet Coke says it's 0 sugar. But if you read the label, all they did was label sugar as citric acid, and now they no longer have to say it's sugar. It's a half-truth. Yes, there's no sugar in it, but that's because you renamed it. Now, the other violations include false referencing. This is when a liar establishes a false premise to support an inference that is not true. So, for example, when a liar states, I'm telling you the truth, I'm a real big sky guy. The sky's purple today. That's false referencing. It's also a lot like this picture, okay? So you have this elephant and a bunch of people are looking at it from different angles, right? Oh, it's a wall. Oh, it's a rope. It's a tree. It's a snake. It's a spear. It's a fan. When we see the whole picture, right? First, we see all these people doing false referencing, right? Look how some of them are dressed as scientists, right? They're trying to fake their credibility. But the other thing that all of them are doing is taking evidence out of context. And this is quoting out of context, sometimes referred to as contextonomy or quote mining. This is an informal fallacy in which a passage is removed from its surrounding matter in such as a way to distort the intended meaning. So, for example, let's say you read an article that says, pies with sugar frosting are not the only causes for cavities, written by the dentist in 2022. Okay? Out of context, or someone committing contextonomy would say, sugar does not create cavities. BuzzFeed, 2022. Okay? That's when you take things out of context. That's a violation because you're not looking at the whole picture. You're just saying what you want to say. and you're faking the credibility. So here's your takeaways. First thing to remember, there are 3 types of plagiarism. There's global, patchwork, and incremental. When you come to class on Thursday, I will ask you for an example of global plagiarism, patchwork plagiarism, and incremental plagiarism. All right. Now, the second thing to remember is that listeners and speakers both have an ethical obligation. Speakers' ethical obligation is to speak the truth and avoid plagiarism, and listeners are to be a sponge and drop prejudgment. The last thing I'm going to ask you on Thursday, when we come back together, is the 4 types of ethical violations, which are lying, okay, half-truths, false references, and contextonomy. Come to class on Thursday prepared to discuss those 4 things, as well as the 3 types of plagiarism. Go ahead and continue on to the next step, step 4, where you will be conducting your own ethical conduct. I will see you on Thursday. Email me if you have questions.